The Senate will come back to order. The Senate will come back to order. The Senate will come to order. Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 19th for a motion.
I don't think I have a motion.
Actually, the senator from the 18th. It's a little late.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to SB 359 as amended by the Senate.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption?
Senate Bill 359 by Senator Hostetler, the 52nd, and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 33 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to insurance so as to provide for certain consumer protections against surprise billing and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 359, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 51 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to torts so as to provide for certain immunities from liability claims regarding COVID-19 and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Kennedy of the 18th offers the following amendment to the House substitute to Senate Bill 359, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 51 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to torts so as to provide for certain immunities from liability claims regarding COVID-19 and for other purposes. That completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th to speak to his motion.
Good evening, colleagues. I appreciate your patience. We have dealt with some really important issues this session. I've been proud to work along beside of you, whether you voted for the bills or not. I appreciate the collective wisdom of this group. Several days ago, we passed a really strong, good, reasonable approach bill in our HB 167. And we debated that bill vigorously, and we talked about it, and we sent it over to the House. And it's been a good bill, and they've had it for a number of days. But they've chosen not to act on our bill. Excuse me, sorry, I thought I was being called. So that's put us in the position of receiving a bill that they have sent over that's been added that I think the senator from Rome is going to speak to a little later. What I've got before you, though, is an amendment, LC 460340S. And this amends their bill with regard to the particular issues of COVID-19 protection. To remind y'all, what we were trying to do is to give businesses in this state some sense of security, some sense of predictability, that in fact, if they can open their doors without being confronted with frivolous lawsuits, without the guys on the billboards filing suits, they're going to prevent our economy from returning. The bill that came over from the House, 359, or that was presented by presented in their bill, 359, does not provide the protections that our bill did. That was the good work of this chamber. It takes a different approach. Our bill stated affirmatively that in fact there is no cause of action if you contract COVID-19 unless it's given to you intentionally or with reckless disregard. The difference in the approach that the House has taken is to, in fact, codify that there is a cause of action in Georgia for getting COVID-19. Yeah, let me say that again. It identifies a COVID-19 liability claim and cause of action. So how do you get there? You get there because of, according to their language, transmission, infection, or exposure of COVID-19 to a claimant. And it goes on and talks about the details. And then troubling, and what we have been working so hard on this evening to work on, is what is it that the plaintiff has to prove? And unfortunately, it included a standard of gross negligence, that all one would have to prove would be gross negligence to, in fact, create and visit liability on our businesses, our donut stores, our whatever. And so we've been working trying to adjust that. And so this bill, in fact, makes some adjustments and says that that business, if they were in reckless disregard for the safety of others, still a standard that can create liability. And if, in fact, that happens, that business can be held responsible. The other ways that we changed the bill that came over and improved it, and with all the work, also talked about and addressed and improved other issues, some of which are just legalese, but some of which is very important with regard to where gross negligence was elsewhere found in the bill. There was even a provision in the bill that says that it's not only for actual injury, but potential exposure. The potential exposure can create liability. And ladies and gentlemen, I tell you that it's very, very concerning to think that that is what the law will be in Georgia. But before I transition and talk about where we are, I want to thank the senator from the 46th for his work. I want to thank the senator from the 51st. And I also want to thank the president of this body who has given us the latitude to deal with the House, to come up with a better version. I thank you for the votes that you cast the other day for HB 167. It is a significantly better piece of legislation. But unfortunately, I am confronted with the fact and the facts of where we are on sine die and where the House is, and them telling us that they're leaving, they're walking out, their members are gone. So we're in the position of either having to accept their bill or face the potential prospect that we leave this chamber, leave this building, and not have a COVID liability bill for our citizens and our business. So with that, Mr. President, because of the timing, because of how this has unfolded, I am not going to offer this amendment. Unfortunately, I think we are faced with a Hobson's choice to accept their HB 359. It's not where we need to be. It's not where our businesses need to be. It does have some protection in the bill that some of the sports facilities and venues would like to have. It has decent protection for our healthcare workers and our hospitals. It's not really where we need to be. It's not the statement I would hope we would make about how we as Georgians are going to treat each other, and more importantly, how we're going to treat the people that dug deep, worked hard, and exposed their own families in some of our most significant times of need, as we've been through for the last 3 months. So, with the idea that something is better than nothing, Mr. President, I want to thank you again for your latitude, your working with me, all of the folks in your office. And with that, Mr. President, I'll yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that I withdraw the amendment that was offered to Senate Bill 359.
The senator from the 18th has moved to withdraw his motion. Is there objection? Or his amendment? Is there objection? Chair hears none, and the amendment is withdrawn. Chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 359.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd to speak to his motion.
This particular bill was my surprise bill from the two bills that we did. We did the House bill. So I guess it is a surprise that I'm up here presenting a lawyer bill. So it's still a surprise bill. but I'll pretend to be a lawyer. And I do want to say that I supported the Senate version that went over there, and was with the Senate version on the amendment in the bill itself. But, you know, one thing we say certainly in healthcare and others is sometimes the enemy of the good is the perfect, because we may not get the perfect and get nothing. And I've heard from hospitals, profit and nonprofit, and business groups that are concerned that they won't get anything. And so the Senate's in this position and needs to move forward, I think. This bill, you know, if you look past the definitions, I think one of the definitions, if you go to line 51, talks about all the entities that are in there. These are where we'll protect our homeowner associations, our businesses, our sports events will be protected. And then if you flip on over to line 101, it talks about that the claimant will have to prove that the actions caused this. We have on 109 back in for the businesses, the gross negligence standard is certainly better than negligence, but I do understand the concerns there. And it, you know, it lays out for our sports teams that they have to put a 10-point font on there on the ticket, signs that businesses have to do that warn people that it's their liability going forward. And again, for our healthcare people on 136, the standard of gross negligence, as well as the willful and wanton misconduct for this. This has a short sunset. It sunsets, if you see the back page, July 14th of 2021. This is a temporary measure. It's not a perfect bill, but again, I've heard from our hospitals and many business groups that want to proceed forward with this due to the late hour and the fact that they will get nothing. And if there's no questions, and I really hope they're not, I'll yield the well.
You have a question. Our good friend, the minority leader, has a question. Maybe his last.
Mr. President, I just can't leave y'all. Stretch this out for a few more hours. Senator Yield.
I'll yield certainly to our minority leader.
Thank you. Could you kind of describe what the difference between, in your mind, is gross negligence and negligence? I mean, wouldn't you think on the job that'd be a pretty bad situation for you in your position to be grossly negligent? I mean, what would be the ramifications? Could you kind of describe what the level would be?
I've never been in that position of having to prove I was negligent or grossly negligent, knock on wood here, and so I haven't been there. I think that I've heard different lawyers in our body argue that, but I have heard them say that gross negligence is a higher standard than negligence. And I do think that our hospitals and our business communities believe that that's going to give them some protection that they don't currently have during this pandemic.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
I'll yield.
Now, if this bill doesn't pass, then the Senate Bill 167 that gave greater protections to businesses is still pending in the House and available for them to accept or agree to, correct?
I think the senator knows of what he speaks.
And do you realize that this bill actually creates a new cause of action, a new tort against businesses for people contracting COVID due to the gross negligence of that business?
Well, I know they have to prove it, and again, I'm not going to argue the attorney thing, but I would be terrible at that. But I have had the attorneys with the hospitals and businesses tell me that they believe this is better than what they fear would be the outcome of not getting it at all.
Will the senator further yield?
I'll yield.
And do those same people tell you that the standards and protections for health care do not change between any versions of these bills, not 167, not the proposed amendment, or this bill? So health care is protected across the board, but no matter which version we take, right?
I think they're good with the version, but again, I've heard from many in the business community, not all of them, but many of them that feel like that this is better for them than not getting anything at all.
Okay. Well, when I vote against your bill, it's not to hurt hospitals, because I know the House has the original Senate version still there they can act on if they truly want to protect businesses.
You have no more questions.
I really appreciate that, and I ask for your favorable consideration on this bill.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know I had said I thought I was going to not be at the well anymore, but I feel compelled to speak. I think y'all know I'm a lawyer, but I am not a true plaintiff's lawyer. I don't do torts. I do business law on the plaintiff and defendant side, and I also do whistleblower law. But I am a small business owner, and we at our company have been working to open our business in a thoughtful manner. And it is important to be able to open your business in a thoughtful manner that protects your employees, because they are your greatest asset, or at least that's what everybody's always said. I truly believe that. I don't need this bill at all as a small business owner to do my job, to take care of my employees who are my greatest asset, and to not put them at risk. Why does everybody else feel they need it? I think it's something to hide behind myself. I find this totally unnecessary. The governor's emergency order has protected businesses throughout this time. And some businesses have done a really crappy job such that the guard had to be called out, and they didn't even want them in their business. And so when those kinds of things are happening, folks, you really need to think about what you're doing. And as a small business owner, I don't need this. I'm going to be responsible. But if I'm not responsible, I know I can be sued. And what is the thing about America? You have to have incentives to do the right thing. Otherwise, people take advantage of the system, and y'all know what I'm talking about. So let's be real here. This is not necessary at all. And then I want to look at the definition of entity on line 51. I think everybody in the world meets this definition. This is not narrowly tailored to healthcare or to the NFL teams or to whoever really, really needs protection. This is everybody in the world. Association, institution, corporation, company, trust, limited liability company, partnership, yada, 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 okay? Anybody can meet that definition. So we haven't protected anybody. We've protected anybody and everybody who don't need protection. And let's talk about gross negligence. On line 102, we talk about gross negligence, willful and wanton misconduct, reckless infliction of harm or intentional infliction of harm. Let me tell you, folks, gross negligence is not the correct standard. It is not the responsible standard. It is not how we as Georgians should be treating each other, as the senator from Macon has talked about many, many times. And then, of course, there's this rebuttable presumption if you have this warning. How many people have read your movie ticket when you buy a ticket and you turn it over and there's like all this small language? I never read any of that until I became a lawyer. And I still didn't understand what was on the back of it. And I tell you, any good lawyer is going to be able to attack that waiver. I'm going to be sure to make sure I can attack it. Just because you've got a sign up on the wall doesn't mean that a good lawyer can't beat that liability waiver. So this is a bunch of gobbledygook. Senate Bill 359 not only contains broad definitions, but does not cover any protections for workers. as I said. Enacting a corporate immunity bill would further create disincentives for even law-abiding employers like myself to protect their workers, producing a race to the bottom for workplace standards and causing health and safety disaster with new hotspots across sectors, and it would spread across the communities. This bill creates an environment where no workplace would be held accountable to keep its workers safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. Georgia workers have a right to safe workplaces and consistent access to PPE, which they have not had. How do I know? Because as a senator, part of my time, and when we weren't in session, was going all over the country trying to find PPE for people in my district. I didn't even know what PPE was until COVID happened. The bar for a safe workplace should not be set at gross negligence, but on recommendations of public health experts and the collective input of workers who work in these conditions every day. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we need to be doing. That's what we did at my office. We've been working with our employees as to how we should open efficiently and effectively to keep them safe and to make sure we're able to thrive for the years to come. If there are no questions, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield,
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate, as you were making your closing remarks, that you addressed the need to have protection for the workforce. And I feel that we, isn't it true, are charged as government. Isn't that a critical element of our responsibility to ensure that there are protections for the workforce and protections for the citizens? They're not up here lobbying us, but the business lobby is hard at work here late at night on a Friday. Isn't that true?
The senator knows of which she speaks, and I absolutely agree that it is our duty to our workers of Georgia, that we have as much duty to them as we do to any company standing out here in the hallway.
Yeah, further inquiry, and it's troubling to hear how busy we are protecting business and how little attention is being paid to the health and safety of the workforce, the backbone workers that are out here working hard through this pandemic, potentially bringing home infection to their family and their loved ones. And I know that 50 transit worker union members have died of COVID. Aren't we called upon to be responsible to that workforce?
The senator knows of what she speaks.
Thank you very much for your comments on the bill, and I'm going to vote against it.
You have no more questions.
Thank you so much. I realize we're trying to reach a delicate balance, but this is not the way to do it. I urge you to vote no on this bill. Thank
Chair
you.
recognizes the minority leader to speak to the measure. Motion.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. You know, this is a very important issue, and I understand why we're here tonight. We have a lot of people who are very scared they may get sick, and if you're a businessman or anyone else, you're afraid if somebody else gets sick in your presence, or you have a restaurant comes in and they get sick, will you be sued? Well, first of all, this is a very rare occurrence, getting sued, because it's hard to lodge blame on someone. You go in a restaurant and later you get sick. It's very, very hard for any lawyer or any individual to say, that restaurant is what got me sick. So it's hard to find a foundation to place a suit, number one. But we're responding to those concerns our citizens have, and we're responding, trying to make them feel better. But I think we're moving down in the wrong direction, because we all know why our tort law presently has the standard of negligence. Because the law now says that you can't sue somebody who's acting reasonably. If they're acting with your reasonable expectation, they won't be sued anyway. So what we're doing in this bill And why we have it sunsetted is because it really is something our constituents would be upset about if we extended for a long period of time, because we know that sooner or later they might go to a restaurant or some place that is, negligent and be upset they can't sue. But where we're given this cover at this time is because of fears. But if we act rationally, we know negligence is a good standard. We know reasonableness is a good standard. And if people act reasonably, they won't be sued. Gross negligence or wanted and willful actions are way over the top. It's like, in the surgery and, the Center for 50 Seconds in Healthcare, it's like having it all laid out for you and just not giving a S and doing the wrong thing. You almost have to have the jury angry at you to get gross negligence. So we shouldn't set that standard, and later people will regret it, because those business owners, they may go to a business somewhere else and find that someone was outrageously negligent and not be able to seek any compensation. Now, as far as workers, in most cases, workers are going to be covered under work comp law. So most of your food plant stuff, they're work comp law. But remember, the AFL-CIO, they brought up some of the unions, and that's partially because the AFL-CIO is against it. But they're just worried, in large part, about the health of their members, just like you are worried about the health of your constituents. We don't want to have our state have businesses or others. Thank you, Mr. President. We don't want to set a standard, or we don't want to send the signal that you can be unreasonable, that you can be negligent, that you don't have to clean the place up. You don't have to do what normal people would expect you to do. You don't have to do that. We don't want to set that standard. The AT&T worker who goes into a house with the cable set up, he doesn't want to be put into a grossly negligent environment, and we shouldn't encourage that. We shouldn't encourage that from any business or anything that we do in our lives. So the standard of gross negligence is one that you should worry about. It's one reason there's a sunset. It'd be better if we defeat this bill in its entirety, and I commend that to you. I think it's rational. I know the concerns of people in my district who have said, I'm worried about being sued. And when I've explained to them, listen, if you act in a reasonable manner, if you clean your tables in a reasonable way, if you act reasonably, then you won't be liable. You have to be negligent under the present standard, which is reasonable. I urge you to defeat this bill. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 19th to speak to the measure.
Hey, thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, thank you for giving me the pleasure again earlier this year to present the most important measure of the year, I believe, to you. And I believe this now is probably the second most important measure that we'll take up at least this evening and this latter part of this week. This bill, I think, is important for a couple of reasons. I'm not someone who's normally accused of coming down here and being a tort reformer. But there is a careful balance that has to be struck when we're weighing out a different and a new normal. That's what we got right here today. You've got people in the halls from our business community. You've got people in the halls who represent our Seventh Amendment and legal climate. And all of them are saying, look, we're not exactly happy with this sucker, but we can live with it. I think when we get to that point where nobody's happy and everybody's only a little bit mad, that we've probably struck the right balance. That's why I'm asking you today, let's set this thing down, give a 2-year window where we know we're not going to have to pick this up again next year. Businesses have some certainty for 2 years. Get this off our plate, move forward with the evening, and make sure that our business community and our sports venues can go back to work. Thank you, Mr. President. If there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 17th for a question.
Senator, yield.
Yes, sir.
Senator, I know you weren't here. You were gone most of this week doing something, but isn't it true that I voted against the first version of this bill?
Senator, if the senator so
You won't know, but I didn't vote for it.
I understand. Thank you for voting for the budget.
Yeah, you're welcome on that. But Senator, isn't it true this bill actually strikes the right balance to make sure there is a standard of care that's still expected at our businesses, but takes into account the fact that we have to make sure as our economy starts coming back, we can still have conventions coming to Atlanta, trade shows coming to Atlanta, and to Columbus and to Savannah, around this state, and making sure that our sporting venues can get open again as well, so we have more revenue coming in, so you can have more money in that budget next year. Isn't that true?
I see the selfish motive of the senator from the 17th now, and thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Again, I think the senator from the 17th is right. When the folks in the halls and the folks are just a little bit mad, but nobody's furious, we probably struck the right balance. Thank you for please considering voting yes to this bill. Mr. President, I yield the will.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've heard people that feel like this bill is too easy on business. You've heard those that think that it's too hard on them. And again, while I did support the Senate version the first time, I think when you hear that on both sides, we may be at a reasonable spot on this. I'm one of those healthcare workers that we talked about that we wanted to protect, and I certainly want to be protected in this. And I think that if somebody is grossly negligent and not protecting me, then they should have an outcome, having to deal with that. But if they aren't, then I think that it's reasonable. This is a one-year bill to get us through this pandemic. I think it's very reasonable, and I would certainly urge the Senate to support this bill and get it to the governor for his signature. With that, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. The senator from the 52nd has moved that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 359. All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 28th rise? He waves. I wave back. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Thumbs up. Mr. Secretary, lock the machine. On the passage of the motion, the yeas are 34, the nays are 16, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute to Senate Bill 359. I want to take a minute to thank some very, very, very important people that make all of us look way better than we deserve. All of our staff members, admin, secretaries, research office, budget office. I want to thank you so much for the help that you've given to all of us. The cumulative talent of help we've got in here is off the charts, and proud to come to work each and every day with you. I also want to take time to thank our secretary and his entire team who absolutely executes to perfection each and every day. Thank you for all of your efforts. And last but not least, I want to thank my team. All of it, just amazing to think about how much our team continues to grow, and thank you so much for all the help that you guys give and all the great advice that I get along the way. So thank each and every one of you. All right, back to business. Chair recognizes the senator from the, for what purpose does the senator from the 7th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State your
President.
inquiry.
Well, first off, Mr. President, isn't it true that this body appreciates your work as well?
That's up to each and every member to decide on their own.
Secondly, Mr. President, further parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, isn't it true that I appreciate your accolades for my haircut over the last 2 weeks? And I just wanted to commend you on your tan.
Thank you. Thank you. I've heard a little bit about that over the last few months. Chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 104.
Mr. Secretary, please read the caption.
Senate Bill 104 by Senator Payne of the 54th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 31-39-4 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating to persons authorized to issue order not to resuscitate so as to revise parental requirement for consent and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 104, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating to sales and use tax so as to repeal sunset provisions regarding certain tax exemptions and for other purposes. That completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill originally had some good Senate language in it, which the House refused to deal with. It also has refused to look at our study of tax credits, not just tax credits, but studying them. However, we need to pass this bill because I don't want to hold the food banks hostage to the House not doing the jobs they should be doing. And so this will take off some sunsets, some that were going to expire this coming Tuesday on our food banks, and also has in organ procurements and our blood banks. And this is a continuation of this. And if there's no questions, I'd urge your favorable consideration.
You have no questions. Any other senator wish to speak for or against the motion? The chair sees none. Senator from the 52nd has moved that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 104. All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute to Senate Bill 104.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight we end the longest term or longest session in our General Assembly history. I move that the Senate stand adjourned. Sine die.
The Majority Leader has moved that the Senate stand. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. The Senate stands adjourned. Sine die.